If you've been watching our last two videos, you know we've been on a 3-week trip to Germany, visiting as many friends and relatives as we possibly can. Well, things don't always go as planned, and when we got to Munich, the city and the region were experiencing their worst snowstorm in the last 80 years. The airport was shut down, trains were canceled, and traffic was snarled. But Tanya and I persevered and saw as much of Munich and its markets as we could, despite the miserable weather conditions and the slippery ice-covered sidewalks. Well, 4 days into our visit, our luck ran out. As we were negotiating the icy sidewalks, Tanya released my arm for just a second to look at her Google Maps, and down she went. I was concerned that she might have landed on her new titanium hip. Fortunately, that was not the case, but in her attempt to break her fall, she hit the sidewalk with her left hand, and she immediately knew that something had gone wrong. As her wrist began to swell and started looking a bit unusual, she was certain she needed to seek medical attention. So when we got back to our hotel 15 minutes later, she was sure she was in trouble and needed to get to an emergency room. The hotel front desk was very helpful in directing us to the closest clinic, the University of Munich Medical Center, and we got a cab ride over. Well, despite all of our precautions, Tanya took a slip and fall on the ice this afternoon, and we have taken her to the emergency room here in Munich, and we're now in the waiting room. We've been processed. We're here where the Krankenwagens have been arriving with people, and so far the process has gone quite smoothly. So we'll let you know how that is. If the rest of our trip, Tanya is walking around with a big cast on her arm, we'll understand, you'll know what it is. Fortunately, nothing has happened to her hip. She landed quite nicely right on her bum, but it did possibly has broken her wrist. So we're going to find out what's going on. See you soon. Tanya was seen by a doctor and underwent X-ray and CT scans of her left wrist, which revealed a multi-fragment fracture of her left radius. She was put into traction for a while and then fitted with a new spiffy cast. A follow-up appointment with an orthopedist in another 2 days was scheduled, and that meeting simply confirmed her diagnosis, and then Tanya was directed to keep on traveling and find another orthopedist in whatever city we would be in to have her wrist checked out again and possibly fitted with a brace. The prospect of continuing our trip, complete with riding several trains, visiting several other cities, checking in and out of hotels, trying to find another doctor, and so on, was not appealing. And so we reluctantly made the decision to fly back home from Munich, cut our holiday 2 weeks short, and pursue additional treatment at home. Now, that turned out to be a good idea because it turns out that she'll need at least another couple of casts, and her recovery time should be about 5 weeks. Now, this experience gives me the opportunity to talk a little bit about the process we went through and how to prepare yourself for the possibility of encountering health emergencies when you travel. Now, here are a few ideas to keep in mind. Number one, don't fret about the care you'll receive. Now, this, of course, may depend on where you are. Now, we were in a highly developed Western country within walking distance to a major medical center. Well, this was the best possible scenario. But most large metropolitan areas will have some sort of medical care available to international visitors. Most countries in Asia, South America, and Europe offer superb medical care, so you don't need to worry about it. Of course, if you're out in the bush in a very underdeveloped country and you run into a problem where surgery may be required, this could be a different story, but fretting about your situation will not improve it, and it will increase your stress level. People break wrists, arms, and legs all over the world and do just fine with the care they receive, so stay positive. Number two, have health insurance. Now, this topic is talked about a lot, and especially as an older traveler, it's a good idea to have some kind of insurance that will at least cover some of your medical expenses while you're abroad. Remember, Medicare does not cover you outside the U.S. Our secondary health insurance coverage does cover our medical expenses while abroad on a reimbursement basis. Just be sure that you keep track of whatever medical receipts you get. The good news is that medical expenses in almost every country in the world are less than that of the United States. But you should be prepared to pay out of pocket for whatever care you receive. So, for example, when we were checking into the emergency room, we were asked if we had German health insurance. Of course, we didn't. So we were required to pay 1,000 euros as a deposit from which any expenses we incurred would be deducted. Credit cards were accepted. So we're still waiting to see what the final bill will be, but we're pretty confident it won't be over 1,000 euros. Number 3, bring your passport to the hospital. Wherever you're treated, they're going to want to know who you are. Just as you would probably have to show your driver's license or some other ID in the US, don't forget to bring your passport. The hospital will probably make a copy of the picture page to keep for their records. Number 4, be prepared for a language barrier. Now, our visit to the Munich hospital was very English friendly. Occasionally, an individual receptionist at a different desk might have a limited use of English, but virtually all of the medical staff we encountered were very easy to communicate with. This may not be the case everywhere you travel, so be prepared with at least Google Translate on your phone to let medical staff know what you need. Number 5, be aware of cultural differences. Not every country embraces the patient participation philosophy that is prevalent in the United States. In Germany and in many other countries, the doctor is still the boss, and he or she are there to tell you what to do and what's going to happen. When Tanya asked to see the x-rays of her wrist, the doctor was very reluctant to show her under the pretense that she probably wouldn't be able to interpret what she was seeing anyway. Well, Tanya is a registered nurse and has seen lots and lots of x-rays, so obviously she would know what she was looking at, but that wasn't the case. He was the doctor. But don't necessarily be shy, but don't be offended if you get the "I'm the doctor, I went to medical school, you're the patient, and you didn't" kind of treatment. Just roll with it. Number 6, understand that your medical treatment might be different than what you're accustomed to in your home country. In Tanya's case, her treatment included not only an x-ray, but a CT scan of her wrist, something that would probably not ordinarily be done in the US. Coincidentally, the medical staff here in Tennessee that we saw afterwards when we got home was very impressed with the thoroughness of Tanya's German hospital treatment. Number 7, be patient. Just as in the US, a trip to the emergency room may take a long time. What you consider an emergency may not be an emergency to them, especially if there are a lot of other patients to be seen. Our visit in Munich took about 4 hours, with long periods of waiting for a doctor or nurse to check in on Tanya. Now, it didn't take too long for her to actually get treated and get emergency help in terms of getting her wrist stabilized and actually getting a temporary cast put on it. But actually seeing a doctor, there was one that we saw initially, and there was a long waiting period before she was able to see a doctor again. So 4 hours is about what it took. But I recently had a visit to a Knoxville emergency room, and I was there for 8 hours. So just don't be surprised. Number 8, you're most likely going to be just fine. Look at the medical visit in another country as another travel experience that you can look back on with joy. Well, maybe not joy necessarily, but you'll look back on it. Over the years, we've both had medical situations come up, and things have always worked out fine. Tanya had a broken ankle in Buenos Aires. I had an inner ear blockage in the Philippines. Those are just a couple of things that we've run into, and they all got worked out just fine. And all these experiences just make our travel experiences that much fuller. So just think of it that way. Number 9, be sure you travel light. And I put this under the medical scenario or the medical category because if you or your travel partner end up with a situation where you can no longer lift your luggage, the other partner will have to pick up the slack. So make sure either of you are capable of carrying all your bags. If you follow some of these tips, you'll be able to weather any medical storm abroad just fine, as we did, even if it's the worst snowstorm in 80 years. Well, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week in our next video. Bye-bye.